I woke up on the concrete with blood between my legs, and the guard standing over me said I was faking it for attention. The holding cell smelled like rust and sweat and something sharper I couldn't name. I'd been there for 48 hours, maybe longer. Time moved differently when you were lying on a bench that was too short for your body, feeling your belly tighten in ways that made your breath catch. I was 6 months pregnant with triplets, 3 babies, 3 heartbeats I'd heard on the ultrasound at the free clinic 2 weeks before they arrested me for a warrant I didn't even know existed. Something about unpaid court fees from a traffic ticket I'd gotten when I borrowed my cousin's car. The system didn't care that I'd never received the notices because I'd been evicted twice that year. The system didn't care about anything except its own paperwork. The arrest happened on campus. I was walking out of my biology lecture, the one I'd been struggling to stay awake in because pregnancy exhaustion was no joke, when 2 officers approached me in the parking lot. They said my name like a question, but their hands were already moving toward their cuffs. I tried to explain, tried to tell them I was pregnant, that I had a doctor's appointment the next day, that there had to be some mistake. One of them, a woman with her hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, just shook her head. "You can explain it to the judge," she said. But there was no judge, not yet. First, there was processing. Then there was the cell. Then there was waiting. The other women in the holding area cycled through quickly. A few hours, maybe a day. They made bail or got released or got transferred. But I stayed. My public defender hadn't called back. My phone call to my aunt went to voicemail. I had $47 in my bank account and no one to ask for the $800 bail. So I waited, and my babies kept growing, and my body kept changing in ways that scared me because I'd missed that doctor's appointment and the one before that, and I didn't know if what I was feeling was normal or dangerous. The first time I asked for medical attention was on my second day. A different guard, a man with a gray mustache and tired eyes, was doing rounds. I stood up carefully, one hand braced against the wall because standing too fast made me dizzy now. "Excuse me," I said. My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. "I'm pregnant, 6 months. I need to see a nurse." He barely looked at me. "Put in a request form." "I don't have a form. No one gave me one." "Request forms are in the day room." "I haven't been to a day room. I've been in this cell." He sighed like I was the inconvenience, like I was the one making his job difficult. "I'll see what I can do." He didn't come back. That night, I felt the first contraction, or at least I thought it was a contraction, a tightening across my whole belly, hard enough to make me gasp, lasting long enough to make me count seconds in my head. 20, 30, 45. Then it released, leaving me shaking. Braxton Hicks, maybe. I'd read about those. Practice contractions. Normal. But it was too early for them to feel like that, wasn't it? And it was definitely too early for real labor. 24 weeks. That's what the clinic had said. My babies needed more time. So much more time. I tried to sleep, but couldn't. The fluorescent lights never turned off completely, just dimmed to a sickly yellow that made everything look diseased. Every time I shifted position, my back screamed. Every time I took a deep breath, my ribs ached from the pressure of 3 bodies pressing against them. By morning, I was bleeding. Not much, just spotting, really, but enough to soak through my underwear, enough to leave a small stain on the gray pants they'd issued me, enough to send ice through my veins, because I knew this wasn't normal. I pressed the call button. Nothing happened. I pressed it again, holding it down this time until my thumb went numb. Finally, a voice crackled through the speaker. "What?" "I'm bleeding," I said. "I'm pregnant and I'm bleeding. I need help." "Someone will check on you." An hour passed, then 2. The bleeding didn't stop, didn't get worse, just continued, steady and terrifying. I sat on the toilet in the corner of the cell, the one with no door, no privacy, just a metal fixture bolted to the wall, and I cried as quietly as I could because I didn't want the other inmates to hear, didn't want anyone to witness how scared I was. When a guard finally came, it wasn't the one before. This one was younger, a woman with sharp eyes and sharper tone. "You're the one who says she's pregnant?"
Says, not is, says. I am pregnant, I told her. With triplets. I'm bleeding. I need to see a doctor. She looked me up and down, her gaze lingering on my belly. I was showing, clearly showing, but I was also fat. I'd always been heavy, even before pregnancy, and I could see her doing the math in her head, deciding whether my stomach was baby or just body. How far along? 6 months, almost 25 weeks. And you're sure you're pregnant? You've seen a doctor? The question felt like a slap. Yes, I have ultrasound pictures in my property. They took them when they booked me. Uh-huh. She made a note on her tablet. I'll send it up the chain. Nurse might see you tomorrow. Tomorrow? I'm bleeding right now. The nurse sees people on her schedule, not yours. If it's a real emergency, you need to be more specific about your symptoms. I wanted to scream, wanted to ask her what part of pregnant woman bleeding in a jail cell wasn't specific enough. But I'd learned young that screaming at people with power over you only made things worse. So I swallowed the rage and the fear and tried to sound calm. My babies could be in danger. I could be in premature labor. If something happens to them because I didn't get help, if something happens, you'll be seen in medical. Until then, you wait like everyone else. She left. The door clanged shut behind her, that sound that was becoming too familiar, the sound of barriers between me and safety, between me and care, between me and anyone who might help. I lay back down on the bench, curled on my side, my hands pressed against my belly, feeling for movement. There, a flutter, a kick. Small, but there, still alive. All 3 of them, I hoped, prayed, please let all 3 of them still be alive. The contraction that hit an hour later was stronger than the first. This time, I couldn't breathe through it. This time, I made a sound, a low moan that I couldn't hold back, and I gripped the edge of the bench until my knuckles went white. When it passed, I knew. This wasn't Braxton Hicks. This wasn't practice. My body was trying to deliver my babies, at 6 months pregnant, in a jail cell, with no help coming. The pain became a rhythm, contractions every hour, then 40 minutes, then half an hour, each one stronger than the last, each one lasting longer. I tried to time them with the clock on the wall, but the numbers started to blur together. All I knew was that my body was betraying me, forcing something that shouldn't happen yet, couldn't happen yet, not here. I pressed the call button so many times I lost count. Sometimes no one answered. Sometimes someone told me to stop abusing the system. Once, someone told me to drink water and lie down, as if I'd been doing anything else. By the 3rd day, I couldn't stand without holding on to the wall. My legs shook, my vision went spotty at the edges. The bleeding had increased, not dramatically, but steadily, and my pants were soaked now, cold and sticky against my skin. I'd asked for clean clothes, been told there were none available in my size, been told to wait until laundry day. There was no dignity in any of it, no humanity. Just me and my bleeding and my contracting body and the indifference of everyone who walked past my cell. A new guard appeared on the 4th day, older, heavyset, with a name tag that read Morrison. He actually stopped when he saw me, actually looked at me like a person. "You okay in there?" I almost laughed. "No, I'm not okay. I've been asking for medical help for 3 days. I'm pregnant. I'm having contractions. I'm bleeding. Please." He frowned, checking something on his tablet. "Says here you were supposed to be seen by the nurse yesterday. I wasn't. That's not possible. If it says, I'm telling you I wasn't. No nurse came. No one came except guards telling me to wait." He looked uncomfortable now, like he was realizing something didn't add up, but wasn't sure what to do about it. "Let me make some calls, see what's going on." "Thank you," I whispered. He left. I waited. The contractions continued. 2 hours later, Morrison came back with a woman in scrubs. Finally, finally. The nurse was middle-aged, efficient-looking, carrying a blood pressure cuff and a stethoscope. She entered the cell and approached me with the kind of brisk professionalism that felt almost like relief. "Let's see what we're dealing with," she said. She checked my blood pressure. High. She listened to my heart. Fast. She pressed her hands against my belly, feeling the shape of it, the tightness. Then she pulled out a fetal Doppler, the kind they used at the clinic to hear the heartbeats. "Let's find these babies," she said. The sound that came through the Doppler was immediate and strong. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Fast and steady. A heartbeat. My first baby. She moved to the Doppler, searching. Another sound. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Different rhythm. My second baby. She kept searching for the third. The silence stretched. She pressed harder, moved the device in wider circles across my belly. Her expression, which had been neutral, began to shift into something more focused, more concerned. "How many did you say?" "3. Triplets. The clinic confirmed it." She kept searching. 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. "I'm only finding 2 fetal heartbeats," she said finally. The world tilted. "What?" "I'm picking up 2 distinct fetal heartbeats, but I can't locate a third. That doesn't necessarily mean... Sometimes positioning can make it difficult, especially with multiples, but you need an ultrasound, a real one, in a proper medical facility." "So get me one," I said, hearing the desperation in my voice. "Please, please get me to a hospital." "I can recommend it, but I don't make that decision. The facility administrator has to approve medical transport, and with budget constraints..." "Budget constraints? My baby might be dead inside me, and you're talking about budget constraints?" She looked genuinely sorry, which somehow made it worse. "I'm going to document everything and mark it as urgent. I'll push as hard as I can, but I need you to understand that the system moves slowly, even for emergencies." "How is this not an emergency?" "It is, but unless you're actively dying right now, actively hemorrhaging, or in active labor, the approval process takes time." She left. "Documented everything," she said. "Marked it urgent," she said. I lay in that cell and felt my babies move. 2 of them, I was sure now, only 2, and wondered if my third child was gone, if one of them had already died while I'd been begging for help that never came. The contractions didn't stop. If anything, they intensified. By that evening, they were coming every 20 minutes. I couldn't eat the food they brought, couldn't keep down water, could only lie there and breathe and count and survive each wave of pain. Morrison checked on me twice more that night. He looked worried now, really worried, and I heard him on his radio arguing with someone. "She needs to go to a hospital. I don't care what the protocol is. Look at her. This is going to be a lawsuit if we don't..." "Yes, I understand, but..." "Fine, fine." He appeared at my cell door, his face tight. "Transport has been denied. Medical says your condition isn't critical enough." "Denied?" "The on-call doctor reviewed the nurse's notes and determined you can be monitored here. If your status changes, if labor becomes active, then they'll reconsider." I couldn't speak, couldn't process what he was saying. My baby might be dead, and they wanted me to wait until what? Until the other 2 died too? Until my life was in so much danger that even they couldn't pretend it wasn't critical? "This is wrong," Morrison said quietly. "I want you to know I think this is wrong, but I don't have the authority." "Then find someone who does," I said. "Please." He nodded and left. I never saw him again. Later, I heard he'd been taken off rotation for the rest of my stay, for being too sympathetic, pain and fear blending into something almost dreamlike. At some point, I realized I was talking out loud, talking to my babies, telling them to hold on, to stay strong, to please, please, please keep fighting.
When morning came, I was weaker. The bleeding had slowed but hadn't stopped. The contractions had spaced out again, but they hadn't disappeared. And I still couldn't feel that third heartbeat, that third flutter of movement that had been there before. A different guard brought breakfast. She slid the tray through the slot without looking at me. I didn't touch it. "I need help," I said. She kept walking.
"I'm losing my baby," I said louder. She paused, turned back. "The nurse already saw you. You're on the medical list. One of my babies might be dead. Do you understand that? Dead. Inside me." For just a moment, something flickered across her face. Not quite sympathy, maybe discomfort. Maybe the first hint of fear that they were letting something terrible happen, that they were going to be part of a story that ended very badly. I'll mention it to the supervisor," she said. She hurried away. 2 hours later, the alarm went off. Not in my cell, somewhere else in the facility. A blaring mechanical shriek that made my head pound. Guards rushed past, shouting into radios. "Lockdown!" someone yelled. "Everyone stay in your cells! Lockdown!" I sat up as much as I could, trying to understand what was happening. Through the small window in my cell door, I could see guards running, could hear doors slamming, could feel the vibration of boots on concrete. Then I saw her, another inmate, being dragged past my cell by 3 guards. She was screaming, thrashing, and her belly was swollen with pregnancy, further along than me, much further. "The baby's coming!" she was screaming. "The baby's coming now!" They pulled her out of sight, but I could still hear her, could hear the guards shouting, could hear her screams getting higher, more desperate. And then, after what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I heard something else. Silence. Complete, awful silence. Then a guard's voice, shaking, "Call 911! Call them now!" The lockdown lasted 6 hours. During that time, no one told us anything. We just sat in our cells, listening to the sound of sirens outside, the sound of footsteps running back and forth, the sound of hushed, urgent conversations we couldn't quite hear. But I could feel it, the shift in the air, the fear. When they finally lifted the lockdown, the energy in the facility was different. Guards moved more carefully, spoke more quietly, looked at those of us who were obviously pregnant with something that might have been guilt, or might have been worry about their own futures. I learned what happened from another inmate during evening count. The woman who'd been dragged past my cell had gone into sudden, catastrophic labor. Placental abruption, someone said. Emergency C-section, someone else whispered. The guards had tried to wait for an ambulance, had wasted precious minutes debating whether it was really that serious, whether they could transport her themselves, whether they'd get in trouble for making the wrong call. By the time the paramedics arrived, it was too late. The baby was born dead. The mother nearly bled out on the floor of the medical unit. She survived. Her daughter didn't. The jail was trying to keep it quiet, but you can't keep that kind of thing quiet. Not when there were witnesses, not when there were surveillance cameras, not when guards started whispering to each other about wrongful death and negligence and career-ending investigations. And suddenly, very suddenly, everyone cared about the pregnant inmates. A new nurse came to see me the next morning, not the one before. This one was younger, more nervous, carrying a thick file folder and a tablet and what looked like genuine fear in her eyes. "I need to do a full assessment, check everything. How are you feeling?" "How do you think I'm feeling?" She didn't answer that, just started running through tests. Blood pressure, temperature, oxygen levels, then the Doppler again. And this time she took her time, documenting every second, every sound, marking down exact locations and timestamps. 2 heartbeats. Still only 2. "I need you to be honest with me," she said quietly. "When did you last feel all 3 babies move?" I thought back, tried to remember through the blur of pain and exhaustion. Before I was arrested. Maybe the day of. I don't know. Everything's been... I can't think straight. "Okay,
That's okay. She made notes. I'm going to recommend immediate transport for an ultrasound and possible intervention. Given what just happened, they're not going to deny it this time. You mean given that someone just died because they denied care? She looked up at me, her face pale. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry this happened to you, that it's taken this long. It should never have gotten to this point. Is my baby dead? I don't know, I can't tell from here, but we're going to find out today, I promise. For the first time in days, I felt something other than despair. Not hope exactly, but possibility. The possibility that someone might actually help me before it was too late. They transported me that afternoon, shackled at the wrists and ankles despite my condition, despite the nurses' protests. Policy, they said. Security risk, they said. I sat in the back of a van, trying to keep my balance as we drove, trying not to think about what the ultrasound might show. The hospital was overwhelming after days in that cell. Bright lights, clean floors, people in scrubs who moved with purpose and urgency. They brought me to the obstetrics wing, got me into a room, helped me onto the examination table. The ultrasound technician was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and gentle hands. She squeezed the warm gel onto my belly and began moving the wand, her gaze focused on the screen. I watched her face, watched for any sign of what she was seeing. Her expression gave away nothing at first, just professional concentration. Then, slowly, her eyebrows drew together. "How many babies did they tell you were carrying?" she asked. 3, triplets. She nodded, still staring at the screen, moved the wand, pressed harder, made some measurements. Then she stopped and looked at me. "I'm seeing 3 babies," she said. The relief was so intense I almost passed out. 3? You're sure? 3 distinct fetuses, yes, but, she paused, choosing her words carefully, one of the babies is significantly smaller than the other 2, significantly, and the positioning is strange. It's tucked behind the others in a way that makes it almost invisible to external monitoring. That's why the Doppler couldn't pick up the heartbeat consistently. But it's alive? All 3 are alive? All 3 are showing cardiac activity, yes, but the small one, I need to get the doctor in here. What I'm seeing, it doesn't quite make sense. She left, came back 5 minutes later with a doctor, a man with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses who introduced himself as Dr. Reeves. He took over the ultrasound, spent a long time examining the images, making measurements, his frown deepening. "Tell me about your prenatal care," he said finally. "I went to the free clinic, had 2 ultrasounds there. They told me it was triplets, that everything looked normal, that I needed to come back for regular monitoring, but..." My voice broke. "But then I got arrested and I couldn't go back." "When was your last ultrasound at the clinic?" "About 2.5 weeks ago." He nodded slowly. "And they told you all 3 babies were developing normally?" "Yes. Is that not true?" 2 of the babies are within normal parameters for gestational age. The third," he pointed at the screen, at a tiny form that was barely visible behind the others. "This baby is roughly half the size of its siblings, and the anatomical structures are abnormal. I'm seeing indicators of severe developmental issues, potential chromosomal abnormalities, what's called twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome in one set, and possible complications from something called a vanishing twin or fetus pepparicious in the other." I didn't understand half the words he was saying. "What does that mean?" "It means this pregnancy is extremely high risk. It means you need immediate admission and close monitoring. It means this smallest baby likely won't survive to term, and its presence is putting your other 2 babies at significant risk. Your body is essentially trying to support 3 fetuses, but one of them is failing, and that failure is creating complications for the others." The room seemed to tilt. "So what do I do?" We need to keep you here, run more tests, possibly consider early delivery if the risk becomes too great, though at 25 weeks that's complicated. The two healthy babies need more time to develop, but every day we wait is another day that the compromised fetus could cause a catastrophic event. And the jail? Do I have to go back? Dr. Reeves' expression hardened. Not if I have anything to say about it. You're being admitted to this hospital under my care. I'll be documenting that returning you to custody would constitute medical negligence and would endanger not only your life, but the lives of 3 unborn children. If they tried to remove you from this facility, they'll be doing it against direct medical orders, and I'll make sure every newspaper in the state knows about it. I started crying. Couldn't help it. Someone finally was fighting for me, for my babies. They admitted me that night, gave me a private room, clean sheets, food that didn't come on a plastic tray, water I could drink without worrying it hadn't been checked in days, and most importantly, they monitored me, constantly. Fetal heart monitors strapped to my belly, tracking all 3 heartbeats 24 hours a day.
The guards stayed outside my door. Policy, they said. I was still technically in custody, but they weren't in my room, weren't watching me every second. And the nurses, the doctors, they treated me like a patient, not a prisoner. The first night in that hospital bed, I slept for 12 hours straight. Woke up to a nurse checking my vitals, smiling at me, asking if I needed anything. I almost couldn't answer. Couldn't process that someone was asking what I needed, offering to help, treating me like I mattered. Dr. Reeves came by twice a day. Each time he did an ultrasound, checked the babies, adjusted my medications. The 2 larger babies, baby A and baby B, he called them, were holding steady, growing, strong heartbeats, normal movement. Baby C, the smallest, was declining. It's not growing anymore, Dr. Reeves told me on my 3rd day in the hospital. Its heart is still beating, but weakly, and it's starting to affect baby B. The shared blood supply, the stress on your body, it's creating problems. So what do we do? We wait, we monitor, and if things get critical, we deliver early. All 3 of them. It's not ideal, but it might be necessary. That night, lying in the dark with the monitors beeping softly beside me, I felt baby C move for the first time in days. Just a flutter, just the faintest whisper of life. And I found myself talking out loud again, telling that tiny, struggling baby that I was sorry, that I wished I could do more, that I hoped they knew I loved them, that I had always loved all 3 of them. 2 days later, everything fell apart. The pain started at 3 in the morning, different from the contractions I'd felt before, sharper, localized on my right side, burning like something was tearing inside me. I pressed the call button and a nurse came running. "Something's wrong," I gasped. "It hurts. It really hurts." She checked the fetal monitors. All 3 heartbeats were still there, but baby C's was erratic now, dipping and spiking in a pattern that made her face go tight. She paged Dr. Reeves, who arrived in minutes despite the early hour, hair mussed and wearing scrubs that looked like he'd slept in them. He did another ultrasound, and I watched his expression change from concerned to alarmed. "We need to deliver, now. Baby C is in severe distress, and it's causing placental complications. If we wait, we could lose all 3. "But they're too early. 26 weeks, that's—" "I know, but they have a better chance out here with our NICU team than they do inside you right now. I'm calling the team. We're taking you to surgery." Everything moved fast after that. Nurses prepping me, shaving my belly, starting new IV lines, an anesthesiologist explaining spinal blocks and emergency protocols, consent forms I could barely read through my tears, and through it all, the pain kept intensifying, that burning on my right side that felt like my body was consuming itself from the inside. They wheeled me into the operating room, bright lights overhead, the smell of antiseptic, people in masks and gowns moving with choreographed precision.
Someone held my hand while they administered the spinal block. Someone else told me I was doing great, that I was so brave, that my babies were going to be okay. I wanted to believe them. Dr. Reeves was there, talking me through each step. You're going to feel pressure, but no pain. We're making the incision now. Almost there. Almost. Baby A is out. Seconds later, baby B. I heard crying. Thin, weak, but definitely crying. My babies. 2 of my babies, alive and breathing and crying. Baby C, Dr. Reeves said, and his voice was quieter now. There was no crying for baby C, just silence and urgent whispers, and the sound of rapid footsteps as someone carried my smallest baby away. I tried to lift my head, tried to see, but the drape blocked my view, and someone was gently pushing me back down, telling me to stay still, they were almost done. Both girls, a nurse told me. Baby A and baby B are both girls, strong lungs on them. And baby C? I whispered. No one answered right away. Then Dr. Reeves appeared beside my head, his mask pulled down, his eyes sad. He's a boy, he said softly. He's alive, but barely. The NICU team is working on him now. He's very, very small, and he has significant anatomical abnormalities. We're doing everything we can. They finished the surgery, stitched me up, wheeled me to recovery. I lay there, numb from the chest down, my arms empty, my body empty, while somewhere in this hospital, my 3 babies fought for their lives without me. A nurse brought me photos 2 hours later. Baby A, 2 pounds 2 ounces, covered in tubes and wires, but with a face that was perfectly formed, perfectly beautiful. Baby B, 2 pounds even, equally tangled in medical equipment, equally perfect.
Baby C, 1 pound 6 ounces. So small he looked more like a doll than a real baby. His skin was translucent, his eyes fused shut, his chest barely wider than my thumb, and the abnormalities were visible even in the photo. His skull wasn't fully formed, his legs were twisted at angles that weren't natural. His heart, the nurse told me, was on the wrong side of his chest. He's not expected to survive, she said gently. The doctors wanted you to know that. They're keeping him comfortable, but his lungs, his heart, his brain, there's just too much wrong. I'm so sorry. I stared at that photo for hours, memorized every detail of my son's face, his tiny fingers, his impossible smallness, wondered what I'd done wrong, what I could have done differently, whether if I'd gotten proper care earlier, he might have had a chance. The guards were still outside my door, still there, still watching, even though I'd just been cut open and my babies were fighting for life. The nurse told me they'd been asking questions, wanting to know when I'd be discharged, when I'd be transported back to the facility. Not for a while, she'd told them firmly. She just had major abdominal surgery and 3 critically premature infants. She's not going anywhere. But I could see it in their faces when they looked in at me. They were getting nervous. The story about the woman who delivered a stillborn baby was spreading. News outlets were starting to ask questions. Advocacy groups were making noise. And here I was, another pregnant inmate who'd nearly lost her babies because the system had failed her. They wanted me gone, wanted this problem to disappear before it became a bigger scandal than it already was. On my 2nd day postpartum, a woman in a suit came to visit. She introduced herself as an attorney with a prisoner advocacy organization, said she'd heard about my case, said she wanted to help. What happened to you was illegal, she told me. Denial of medical care to a pregnant inmate, failure to respond to a medical emergency, keeping you in custody for unpaid court fees without considering your medical condition, all of it violates your constitutional rights. We want to file suit against the jail, the county, the individuals involved. I don't care about that right now, I said. I just want to see my babies. Of course, but I need you to know that you have options, that what they did to you was wrong, and there are consequences for that. People need to be held accountable. She left her card, told me to call when I was ready. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days after the delivery, one of the guards, a new one I hadn't seen before, came into my room. She looked uncomfortable, kept her eyes on her tablet instead of on me. "Orders came down," she said. "You're being discharged tomorrow, transported back to the facility." "Tomorrow? I can't. I just had surgery. My babies are in the NICU." "Those are the orders. Doctor already signed off on your discharge." "What doctor? Dr. Reeves wouldn't—" "County doctor. Came by this morning, reviewed your chart, determined you're stable enough for release." I felt ice in my veins. "You're not doing this. You're not taking me away from my babies when they're this sick, this fragile." "Ma'am, I'm just following orders." "Then tell whoever gave the orders that I'm not going, that they can't do this." She looked at me finally, and I saw something in her face. Not quite sympathy, more like recognition, like she was seeing me, really seeing me, maybe for the first time. Seeing a mother who'd just been torn open to save her babies, who was lying in a hospital bed with staples in her belly and milk leaking through her gown, who hadn't been allowed to hold her children because they were too fragile, too sick, too small. "I'll pass along your concerns," she said quietly. She left. I immediately called the nurse, who called Dr. Reeves, who came storming into my room 20 minutes later with a fury I'd never seen in him before. "They're trying to discharge you tomorrow?" "That's what the guard said." "By my dead body." He pulled out his phone, started making calls right there in my room. I heard him shouting at someone, using words like unconscionable and medical negligence, and "I will personally make sure every media outlet in this state knows what you're doing." When he hung up, his face was red. "They sent a doctor who works for the jail system to evaluate you, a doctor who has no specialization in obstetrics, who spent less than 5 minutes looking at your chart, and who signed off on your discharge because that's what he was paid to do. It's corrupt, it's disgusting, and I'm not letting it happen." "Can you stop it?" "I'm going to try. I'm filing a formal objection, contacting the patient advocate, and reaching out to that attorney who came to see you. This isn't just about your case anymore. It's about every woman who's ever been pregnant in that jail, every woman who might be in the future. This has to stop." That night, baby C died. The nurse came to tell me at 2 in the morning. His heart had stopped. They'd tried to resuscitate him, but his body was too damaged, too small, too broken to sustain life. He was gone. I'd never held him, never touched his skin, never whispered to him that he was loved, that he mattered, that his short life meant something. The nurse asked if I wanted to see him. They could bring him to me, she said. Let me hold him just once, say goodbye. I said yes. They brought my son to me wrapped in a white blanket, his tiny body already cooling. He weighed nothing, was smaller than my hand, smaller than anything that should be called a baby. But he was mine, my boy, my third child. I held him against my chest and cried until I had no tears left. Told him I was sorry. Sorry for the genes that had given him a body that couldn't survive. Sorry for the system that had denied me the care that might have detected the problems earlier, might have given us more time, might have let me prepare for this moment, instead of having it thrust upon me in a cold hospital room with guards outside my door. The nurse took photos, for me to keep, she said, so I could remember him, so I could prove he existed. When they took him away, I felt something inside me harden, turn to stone. The grief was there, would always be there, but underneath it was something else now, anger. Righteous, burning anger at everyone who had let this happen, who had put their procedures and policies and budgets above my life, above my babies' lives. The attorney came back the next morning. I was ready this time. "File the lawsuit," I said. "All of it. Everything. I want them to pay for what they did." She smiled, grim and satisfied. "Already started the paperwork. By the time I'm done, everyone involved is going to wish they'd just taken you to the hospital when you first asked." They didn't discharge me the next day, or the day after that. Dr. Reeves' intervention, combined with the attorney's threats of legal action and media exposure, had bought me time. The jail backed off, suddenly very concerned with following proper medical protocols, suddenly very aware that the spotlight was turning toward them. My daughters, I'd named them Zara and Aaliyah, stayed in the NICU for 8 weeks. 8 weeks of touch-and-go moments, breathing scares, feeding tube adjustments, and slow, painful progress. I was allowed to stay at the hospital the entire time, technically still in custody, but practically free. The guards a distant presence that grew less and less relevant as the days passed. The attorney worked fast. Within 2 weeks, she'd filed a federal civil rights lawsuit naming the jail, the county, the medical contractors, and 6 individual staff members. The local news picked up the story, then the national news. Suddenly, my face was on television, my story was being told in newspapers, and people were angry, really angry. The woman who'd lost her baby, the one whose screams I'd heard during the lockdown, she joined the lawsuit. So did 3 other women who came forward with their own stories of denied care, medical neglect, and casual cruelty during their pregnancies while incarcerated. What had started as my personal nightmare became a class action case that threatened to dismantle the entire system of how pregnant inmates were treated. The guards who'd ignored my pleas, who'd told me to wait, who'd accused me of faking, they were put on administrative leave pending investigation. The facility administrator resigned. The medical contractor lost its contract with the county, and the on-call doctor who'd reviewed my case and declared me non-critical, his medical license came under review. But none of that brought my son back. We held a funeral for him when my daughters were 3 weeks old, a small service, just me and my aunt and the hospital chaplain. We named him Isaiah, buried him in a cemetery with a tiny headstone that read, "Isaiah, beloved son, your life mattered." The jail never sent representatives, never acknowledged his death, never apologized. By the time my daughters were strong enough to leave the NICU, the criminal case against me had been dismissed. The traffic warrant, the unpaid fees, all of it wiped away by a judge who'd been appalled by what he'd read in the lawsuit filings. He issued a public statement condemning the jail's handling of my case and ordering a full review of their medical policies. I walked out of that hospital with my daughters in my arms and no shackles on my wrists. The attorney had arranged housing for me, a small apartment paid for by an emergency fund from her organization. I had formula, diapers, clothes, everything I needed to start over, to give my girls the life their brother never got to have. The lawsuit took 2 years to settle. The county ultimately agreed to a multi-million-dollar payout split between all the plaintiffs, though no amount of money could undo what had happened. More importantly, they agreed to sweeping reforms, mandatory OB/GYN evaluations within 6 hours of intake for any pregnant inmate, immediate hospital transfer for any medical concerns, third-party oversight of the jail medical system, and comprehensive training for all staff on pregnancy-related issues. The guards who'd been most directly involved were fired. Not arrested, not criminally charged, just fired. It wasn't enough, but it was something, and several of them, I heard, struggled to find work afterward, their names now permanently associated with a scandal that had made national headlines.
Morrison, the one guard who'd tried to help, who'd been punished for showing compassion, the attorney tracked him down. He'd quit shortly after my case, unable to stomach working in a system that cared more about procedures than people. She hired him as an investigator for her organization, helping to document abuse in other facilities, using his insider knowledge to protect the vulnerable. He came to see me once, about a year after everything happened. My daughters were toddling by then, tiny but fierce, their lungs that had once struggled to take in air now strong enough to scream with impressive volume. We sat in my small living room while they played, and he told me he was sorry, that he should have done more, that he'd carry the guilt of what happened to me, to my son, for the rest of his life. I told him what I'd learned in therapy, what I was still learning, that guilt belongs to the people who created the system, who enforced it, who looked at pregnant women in pain and chose paperwork over humanity. That his attempt to help, however futile it had seemed, had mattered. That remembering his face, his concern, had given me something to hold on to in the darkest moments. He cried. So did I. The attorneys' organization used my case as the foundation for a nationwide push for reform. They published reports, testified before legislators, trained advocates in other states. The phrase "pregnant behind bars" became shorthand for a system that needed to change. And slowly, grudgingly, it began to. Not everywhere, not fast enough, but more than it had been. I went back to school eventually, finished my biology degree while raising my daughters, somehow managing to balance classes and childcare and therapy appointments. It took 3 extra years, but I graduated. My aunt kept Isaiah's photo on her mantle next to photos of his sisters, making sure they grew up knowing they'd had a brother, that he'd been real, that his brief life had changed things. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Morrison hadn't tried to help, if the other woman hadn't gone into labor so catastrophically, if my case hadn't landed in the hands of an attorney who gave a damn. How many other women are still in facilities right now, feeling contractions in their cells, begging for help that isn't coming, losing babies who could have been saved? The thought keeps me awake some nights. But then I look at my daughters, Zara with her fierce independence, Aaliyah with her quiet determination, and I remember that surviving isn't just about getting through. It's about what you do with the life you're given, the platform you're handed, the voice you discover you have. I speak now, at conferences, at legislative hearings, at rallies. I tell my story over and over, each time hoping it reaches someone who needs to hear it, someone who can change something, someone who will remember that pregnant women in jails are still human beings deserving of dignity, of care, of basic medical attention. I tell them about the contractions in a cell with no help coming. I tell them about the bleeding no one cared about. I tell them about 3 heartbeats and 2 living daughters and 1 tiny boy who died because the system valued its procedures over his life. I tell them about guards who mocked me, who doubted me, who let me suffer. And I tell them about the moment those guards finally felt fear. Not fear of my anger or my lawsuit, but fear of their own complicity, fear of what they'd allowed to happen, fear of looking in the mirror and seeing someone who'd let a woman give birth in agony, who'd let a baby die who might have lived with proper care. That fear, I tell them, is the beginning of change. Because people who are afraid of being monsters can choose to be human instead, but only if we make them choose. Only if we refuse to be silent. Only if we remember every woman who screamed behind bars and make sure the world hears us. My name is on court documents now, in medical journals, in policy recommendations. But more importantly, it's on my daughter's birth certificates, right next to their brother's name. 3 babies, 2 survivors, 1 system that nearly destroyed us all, and 1 mother who refused to let their stories die in silence. That's what I tell people when they ask how I survived it. I didn't just survive. I made sure what happened to me meant something. I made sure Isaiah's life meant something. And I'll keep telling this story until every pregnant woman behind bars has someone fighting for her the way I had to fight for myself. Until the guards who ignore their pleas feel the fear they should feel, until the system that failed us breaks and reforms and becomes something better. That's justice. That's how we honor the ones we lost. That's how we make sure it never happens again.
Morrison, the one guard who'd tried to help, who'd been punished for showing compassion, the attorney tracked him down. He'd quit shortly after my case, unable to stomach working in a system that cared more about procedures than people. She hired him as an investigator for her organization, helping to document abuse in other facilities, using his insider knowledge to protect the vulnerable. He came to see me once, about a year after everything happened. My daughters were toddling by then, tiny but fierce, their lungs that had once struggled to take in air now strong enough to scream with impressive volume. We sat in my small living room while they played, and he told me he was sorry, that he should have done more, that he'd carry the guilt of what happened to me, to my son, for the rest of his life. I told him what I'd learned in therapy, what I was still learning, that guilt belongs to the people who created the system, who enforced it, who looked at pregnant women in pain and chose paperwork over humanity. That his attempt to help, however futile it had seemed, had mattered. That remembering his face, his concern, had given me something to hold on to in the darkest moments. He cried. So did I. The attorney's organization used my case as the foundation for a nationwide push for reform. They published reports, testified before legislators, trained advocates in other states. The phrase "pregnant behind bars" became shorthand for a system that needed to change. And slowly, grudgingly, it began to. Not everywhere, not fast enough, but more than it had been. I went back to school eventually, finished my biology degree while raising my daughters, somehow managing to balance classes and childcare and therapy appointments. It took 3 extra years, but I graduated. My aunt kept Isaiah's photo on her mantle next to photos of his sisters, making sure they grew up knowing they'd had a brother, that he'd been real, that his brief life had changed things. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Morrison hadn't tried to help, if the other woman hadn't gone into labor so catastrophically, if my case hadn't landed in the hands of an attorney who gave a damn. How many other women are still in facilities right now, feeling contractions in their cells, begging for help that isn't coming, losing babies who could have been saved? The thought keeps me awake some nights. But then I look at my daughters, Zara with her fierce independence, Aaliyah with her quiet determination, and I remember that surviving isn't just about getting through. It's about what you do with the life you're given, the platform you're handed, the voice you discover you have. I speak now, at conferences, at legislative hearings, at rallies. I tell my story over and over, each time hoping it reaches someone who needs to hear it, someone who can change something, someone who will remember that pregnant women in jails are still human beings deserving of dignity, of care, of basic medical attention. I tell them about the contractions in a cell with no help coming. I tell them about the bleeding no one cared about. I tell them about 3 heartbeats and 2 living daughters and 1 tiny boy who died because the system valued its procedures over his life. I tell them about guards who mocked me, who doubted me, who let me suffer. And I tell them about the moment those guards finally felt fear. Not fear of my anger or my lawsuit, but fear of their own complicity, fear of what they'd allowed to happen, fear of looking in the mirror and seeing someone who'd let a woman give birth in agony, who'd let a baby die who might have lived with proper care. That fear, I tell them, is the beginning of change. Because people who are afraid of being monsters can choose to be human instead, but only if we make them choose. Only if we refuse to be silent. Only if we remember every woman who screamed behind bars and make sure the world hears us. My name is on court documents now, in medical journals, in policy recommendations. But more importantly, it's on my daughter's birth certificates, right next to their brother's name. 3 babies, 2 survivors, 1 system that nearly destroyed us all, and 1 mother who refused to let their stories die in silence. That's what I tell people when they ask how I survived it. I didn't just survive. I made sure what happened to me meant something.
I made sure Isaiah's life meant something. And I'll keep telling this story until every pregnant woman behind bars has someone fighting for her the way I had to fight for myself. Until the guards who ignore their pleas feel the fear they should feel. Until the system that failed us breaks and reforms and becomes something better. That's justice. That's how we honor the ones we lost. That's how we make sure it never happens again.